Hi everyone, Dr. Andi here, and it is time for today's Facebook Live. I hope you've all had an absolutely wonderful holiday. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed your holidays and took the much needed rest and break that most of us need this time of year. I am back in the clinic, but I am still off from seeing patients today, so I'm still enjoying some of my holiday before I get to bring everybody back in next week and start seeing my patients again and treating. So I hope you guys took this time to rejuvenate and regenerate. I hope everyone had an amazing holiday. And so today we are back and we're going to answer all of your keto questions. It's such a great time to really log on and to be a part of this call. I know a lot of us need a little bit of a reset. Some of us need sort of a bit of a restart if we've maybe deviated a bit from our typical healthy lifestyle, healthy diet. So it's a really great way to start the year. For those of you who are new, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself and who I am, and then I will get started answering all of your questions. So I am a naturopathic doctor. I have been practicing for almost 10 years now. I practice up in Toronto, Canada. So it's a little bit cold up here, but we haven't gotten a ton of snow just yet, so that's not too bad for us. I started initially with a focus in sports medicine. I was a dancer, personal trainer, Pilates instructor, martial artist. And so I initially started in sports medicine, and then slowly my practice transitioned more into metabolic nutrition, into weight loss, into focusing on hormonal balance, insulin sensitivity, hormone replacement for men and women. And the foundation of my practice is always low carb and keto. I personally have been ketogenic for over 10 years. It's something I've been introducing and practicing with my patients, again, for about 10 years now, and something I've done personally for almost more than that. I work in a clinic with about 19 other practitioners. We have medical doctors, naturopaths, osteopaths, chiropractors, and our foundation for all of the practitioners is really that low carb keto lifestyle. It's really the foundation of all of our protocols and all of our treatment plans for our patients. So I can see your questions coming in already, and I do want to talk a little bit about the reboot, because a lot of people are talking about restarting, needing a reset. How do we do that? And so I talked about this a little bit before we moved into the Christmas holiday. But this is one of the greatest things that I use for my patients as a really good reset or entering into a holiday season. So the reboot is coming up. So I do encourage everyone to join if they can. If you're new to intermittent fasting, then I do encourage you to maybe start with some of those shorter fasts initially, with sort of those 16-hour windows of fasting, and then to join the reboot. So how often do I recommend the reboot? Usually monthly. The way it works, or the way I suggest for my patients, is I encourage them to do intermittent fasting regularly during the week. Once a week, I have them do an extended intermittent fast, so maybe about 24 hours. And then once a month, I want them to do that longer intermittent fast, and that's when I want them to do a reboot, essentially. And it's a really great way. It's a really great way to move into a holiday when you know you're not going to be really on track the way you normally are, and it's a great way to close out and sort of reset in the new year. One of the things I love about this extended intermittent fasting and the reboot overall is, again, we talk a lot about autophagy. What is that? What are we doing when we do this extended fasting? So what we're allowing our bodies, it's kind of a way to sort of clean house. There's a really big link here to insulin as well. We're trying to lower those insulin levels, and when our insulin levels are low, it allows our body to move into that autophagy state, and that's where we can clear out some of those dead, damaged cells that we don't really want to accumulate, and we can allow our body to create new healthy cells. We are also resetting our metabolism. There's often concern about muscle loss, but what we actually find with the intermittent fasting, we also find with intermittent fasting and with the extended reboot, is that we maintain muscle mass. So you're not actually going to lose your muscle mass. It does allow for, again, decreasing those insulin levels and improving that insulin sensitivity overall. So it's a really great way. It's a really great way to sort of reset the metabolism and move into that new year and kind of help give us a restart from some of our indulgence. So some of our questions, can you drink coffee while you're doing a reboot, or if you're intermittent fasting? Yes, definitely you can have coffee. The goal of the intermittent fasting is really just to get those insulin levels down. So there's also some debate. If you're Googling, you'll also see some debate. Can you have that MCT oil? Can you have the 143 in that fasting window? And essentially, yes, you can. During the fasting windows, what we're wanting to do is decrease those insulin levels. And so things like MCT oil aren't going to cause an insulin spike. So you're still going to get the same benefit if you're introducing some of those oils, or if you're having coffee without sugar in it. Yes, absolutely, you can do those things. Tea is fine. Bone broth is fine, and in the reboot, that kit will come with all of the things that you need during that period of time. So in the reboot, follow what's in your kit, and then after that, yes, you can still do your coffee or your 143 or however you want to add those things in. So questions about Keto NAT. I've seen a few questions in here about the Keto NAT. So I'll just explain a little bit about what that is. I know Dr. Lowry did a really great post on that earlier, so I won't do too much because he's got a great video that was just posted. Essentially what it is are ketones made through a natural fermentation process. And so fermentation is similar to what happens when we have lactic acid buildup in our muscles, for example. So when you exercise and your muscles get a little bit sore or tight, that's a process of fermentation where we build up lactic acid. So essentially what it means is there's a lack of oxygen, which allows us to create an acid. And that's essentially what is happening, and that's what we've done in order to create ketones. So it's a natural fermentation process without any additives or chemicals along the way. And what we're finding with some of the individuals who are taking NAT is that they get fewer digestive upset. Some people get a little bit of, they might get a little bit of nausea or upset stomach initially, or heartburn when they first start taking their ketones, and that does go away as you adapt. But we're finding that that's a little bit less with the Keto NAT version. And so that's often helpful. So it's a little bit less with the Keto NAT. And we're finding the absorption is really great as well with the Keto NAT. So definitely worth a try. So hair loss, lots of questions about hair loss. So generally, if somebody is experiencing hair loss when they start to follow a ketogenic diet, essentially what that tells me is that they're either not doing it properly or they're nutrient deficient. If you are following your diet properly, and again, when you Google, you'll see a million different ways to follow a ketogenic diet. And often what I find is people are just eating, chicken and lettuce all day long, and they think that they're keto, but that's not really keto, and they're missing out on those fats. And those fats are essential for hormone production, for the growth of hair, our nails, healthy skin. So I'll often see individuals experiencing hair loss or thyroid disruption when they're not following the diet effectively or properly. But when they have all those nutrients in, they're getting the fats in, their minerals are balanced, we don't see that. You also have to remember that hair loss is something that we see after a 3-month period of time. So if you start to experience hair loss, you need to go back 3 months and figure out what happened 3 months ago. So if you've just started a ketogenic diet, you just started ketones, and you're experiencing hair loss, that's probably not it. It's something that happened 3 months ago, because there's a bit of a 3-month lag period when it comes to hair loss. So you have to keep that in mind as well, and kind of go back and see what happened 3 months before. So someone who is hypoglycemic, that's someone, if you're hypoglycemic, there is a lot of concern about intermittent fasting or fasting overall and extended reboot if you're experiencing hypoglycemia. And so if you are hypoglycemic, you will have to approach that a little more slowly. But essentially, I do find with my patients who do experience hypoglycemia, once you become keto adapted, you don't experience that same impact or influence that you feel when your blood sugar is low, because your body is using fat for fuel. But you just have to work with your healthcare provider so they can help you manage that effectively and help you work towards a lower sugar, higher fat diet and that fasting in a way that will work for you, and where you won't experience some of those same effects that you're concerned about. So gallbladder, what happens if you don't have a gallbladder? So I get that question a lot. Essentially, with a gallbladder, if you're concerned about taking exogenous ketones, there's no issue with taking exogenous ketones if you've had your gallbladder removed. The concern is often that you're not able to digest fats when you've had your gallbladder removed. So taking exogenous ketones shouldn't be a problem. Again, ask your healthcare provider, make sure it's right for you, and that they've approved that it's okay for you to take. But no, you shouldn't have any issue. And for those who are following a ketogenic diet who don't have a gallbladder, those are individuals who will need to be taking a digestive enzyme with ox bile. And the ox bile will help to break down and digest those fats, which is often the concern of someone who's had their gallbladder removed. Even if my patients are not keto, if they've had their gallbladder taken out, I'm asking them to take those digestive enzymes, because at no point do I ever want my patients on a low-fat diet. We need fats in our diet for healthy hormone production, for, again, as I mentioned earlier, healthy skin, healthy nails, for brain health. So I'm never putting my patients on a low-fat diet. So I would be giving them, even if they're not keto, I'm still giving them digestive enzymes with ox bile in them. So Graves' disease and ketones and ketosis. So I'm not sure if you're asking if it's safe for you to take or if there's benefit. So again, if you have any medical condition, you have to work with your healthcare provider. And it's important to know that taking exogenous ketones or following a ketogenic diet will not cure any medical condition, but there are areas where it could be beneficial. Taking exogenous ketones or following a ketogenic diet should not disrupt thyroid hormone production. So if you do suffer from Graves', or even on the opposite end, if you suffer from Hashimoto's, you shouldn't see a negative impact on your thyroid because you're following a ketogenic diet or because you're taking exogenous ketones. We do often get questions about autoimmune conditions overall, and so I tend to get that every week, so I'm going to wrap this all together. And so again, this would also include fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. Lupus, I get a lot of questions on as well from an autoimmune standpoint. So would there be benefit to an autoimmune condition if you start to take exogenous ketones or follow a ketogenic diet? And so I always like to talk about the underlying contributing factors to autoimmune. Most people are told that autoimmune, we don't know the cause, there's no cure, we don't know why it happens. What we often see with autoimmune is there's a very high stress response. And so something that happened, either a stressful response over a long period of time or a very stressful event that happened right before the onset of autoimmune. So we know that stress is a very high trigger. We also know with autoimmune conditions is we see three things. We see underlying systemic inflammation, we see mitochondrial dysfunction, and we see low BDNF. So what is BDNF? BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's a protein in the brain that allows for new neuronal connections to be created. And what we find is that individuals who suffer from autoimmune conditions often have low BDNF levels. BDNF is also associated with cognitive decline, so low BDNF levels are associated with impaired cognition as we age. As we age, we lose BDNF anyway. And there's also a genetic component there. Some of us genetically do not make or are not genetically predisposed to making optimal BDNF levels. So that's something that we often see underlying autoimmune condition is that BDNF level. And what we've found is that the two best ways to upregulate BDNF are through intermittent fasting or extending that intermittent fast, and through ketogenic diet or exogenous ketones. They've found that beta-hydroxybutyrate can actually upregulate BDNF production, so there could be some benefit there. We also know mitochondrial dysfunction will underlie autoimmune conditions, and the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. That's where we create all the energy in our body, so it's essential that the mitochondria is functioning optimally. And in autoimmune conditions, we see that the mitochondria isn't functioning as optimally as it should, and we found that beta-hydroxybutyrate can actually enhance mitochondrial function. It also encourages the production of something called glutathione, which is one of our most potent antioxidants. So glutathione can actually help improve mitochondrial function and energy production, and can work to help act as an antioxidant. And antioxidants are what we need to help manage those free radicals produced by stress. So there are a few multifactorial issues there, as well. And then again, addressing that underlying systemic inflammation. So, and again, a ketogenic diet, exogenous ketones will not cure any health condition or autoimmune condition, but there could be benefit from some of those underlying conditions that are impacting. So are there any interactions with pain and antidepressant medication? We get lots of medication questions. Obviously, if you're on medication, you have to work with your healthcare provider. That's essential. But I do have a lot of patients who are taking medication, pain, antidepressants, anxiolytics, and who are taking ketones or following a ketogenic diet. So if your doctor has said that that's safe for you, what I usually recommend is just taking them away from your prescription drugs. So if you're taking an antidepressant or pain medication, just give yourself about a 3-hour window before adding in your ketones. And if they've questions about that, there is often concern about the antidepressant, because there's been some research looking at the role of ketones when it comes to mental health. And what we have found is that beta-hydroxybutyrate has been shown to upregulate a neurotransmitter in the brain called GABA. And GABA is a very calming neurotransmitter. It's something I often give to individuals who are suffering from anxiety or to depression. And for those who do suffer from either of those conditions, we often see an imbalance in those neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers in the brain. So again, those are some of the concerns if somebody is on an antidepressant. So if you're in natural ketosis, why would you take exogenous ketones? That's a great question. And essentially what we're finding, if you're already in nutritional ketosis, what you end up with when you add in the exogenous ketones is a cumulative effect. Some people get concerned that their body is going to stop making ketones. What is the benefit if you add the ketones in? And essentially what happens is you have a cumulative effect and you increase your blood ketone levels. So often we'll find that individuals can get higher blood ketone levels than they normally do just through nutritional ketosis alone, and they get greater benefit when they do add in the exogenous ketones. We also see really great benefit from an endurance or a fitness or performance standpoint as well. So that's often somewhere where we'll see improvement if you're already in nutritional ketosis. So for those who are already following a ketogenic diet, I often encourage trying and just adding in the exogenous ketones and experience the benefit for yourself. And again, often you'll experience greater energy, greater endurance, and so it just amplifies the effect that you've been getting from a ketogenic diet. And that goes along actually with the question of, well, what if you're not following a ketogenic diet? And when we look at at the benefit of someone who's just in nutritional ketosis, in ketosis and taking exogenous ketones, or following a typical diet and taking exogenous ketones, you will still get benefit if you're on a normal, just haven't changed your diet at all, and you're taking exogenous ketones. That's one of the greatest benefits of being able to supplement with them if you can't follow the diet, or if you're not able to get into nutritional ketosis. Some people that can take 6 months. Then you can still experience the benefit of having ketones in your system and of an elevated blood ketone level. But the greatest benefit is seen when you're following nutritional ketosis and a ketogenic diet together. So how long do the effects of ketones last? That depends. That depends for everyone. Everyone will be different, but there's a period of time, anywhere from 3 to 6 hours it could stay in your system for, but it depends on how quickly your system will use them or how much is needed at that specific amount of time. You can't overdose on ketones. They're water soluble, so if your body doesn't need it, it will just come out in your urine. But if you are active or if you have a higher need or demand for ketones, then they'll be used a little bit faster. So I'll often recommend for individuals starting with one pack or one serving a day, usually in the morning if you're new, but I usually move my patients up to twice a day. So I'll have them do it in the morning and then maybe in the afternoon when most people get that energy dip, or if you work out in the evening, just before the evening workout as well. So questions about celiac disease. So questions about celiac disease, I do get that question a lot. So there's some really great information looking at the role of exogenous ketones or beta-hydroxybutyrate on the gut. And what they've found is that beta-hydroxybutyrate actually encourages the production of healthy gut bacteria. There's also some research looking at some potential anti-inflammatory component of beta-hydroxybutyrate, Again, it's not going to cure any autoimmune condition, and I touched on autoimmune a bit earlier, and celiac disease is an autoimmune condition. You can't cure it, but you do obviously have to be 100% gluten-free. There is an increased risk of colon cancer if you do have celiac and you're still consuming gluten. So it won't cure celiac disease at all, but it could help encourage some of that healthy gut microbiome overall, but it won't be detrimental if that's a concern. It's not going to be detrimental. How long before a workout should you be drinking ketones? So usually I recommend doing it about 30 to 45 minutes before a workout. So usually that's the sort of ideal time to allow for absorption and for your body to be able to use it. So I would do about 30 to 45 minutes. So genetic liver disease, so that's a very broad question. So I'm going to wrap that more into whether or not it's safe if somebody had for the liver overall. I can't really comment on any specific genetic liver condition. I'm not really sure what that liver condition would be, but I will address whether or not it's safe for the liver overall. And I'll actually add the kidney into there as well, because there's a lot of concern about exogenous ketones or the ketogenic diet and the impact on the liver and the kidney. And so we'll start first by saying there's no evidence to this point to show that exogenous ketones are detrimental to the liver or to the health of the kidney. But what we have actually found is that beta hydroxybutyrate could actually be beneficial to the health of the liver. And it could also be beneficial to the health of the kidneys overall. So we're not seeing detrimental effects, we're actually seeing beneficial effects in studies looking at exogenous ketones. There's some really interesting research looking at individuals who are going through dialysis, and they find that they do better when they're following a ketogenic diet as well. So there could be some benefit there, but no, we haven't seen any detrimental impact. So are people with AFib affected by ketones? So I'm not sure if you're asking just if it's safe to take if you have AFib. So again, if you suffer from any medical condition, you have to work with your healthcare provider. But overall, at this point, the patients I have who suffer from AFib, I do have some who are ketogenic and taking exogenous ketones, but I am monitoring them closely, and for them it hasn't shown any detrimental impact. But again, you have to work with your healthcare provider. To make sure that that's safe for them. So if you're not following a ketogenic diet, can you do intermittent fasting? So yes, absolutely, you can do that. The intermittent fasting and the reboot are some of the first things I introduce to my patients right off the bat who aren't able to change their diet. I find that adding in the exogenous ketones and then adding in the fasting is actually one of the best ways for them to see results really quickly, even if they're not able to change their diet yet. So yes, absolutely, I would add in intermittent fasting and ketones, even if you're not making a dietary change. And then I would also absolutely make sure that you're adding in the reboot and some of the extended fasting, especially if you're not going to make any dietary changes. Those would actually be very beneficial. So yes, I would say to add that in, absolutely. So what do I think about intermittent fasting and coffee creamer in your coffee? So a little bit earlier we were talking about MCT oil and what is considered breaking your fast. And so as long as in that fasting window you're not consuming, we don't want the insulin spike. It's that low insulin that we're looking for in those fasting windows. So yes, I do often allow cream in coffee in that fasting window. I will allow MCT oil in that fasting window, but I'm still wanting to make sure definitely no sugar in your coffee or anything like that, because we're wanting to make sure that we decrease. We want to make sure that we're decreasing the insulin response. All right. So many questions. I hope I get through all of this for you. So can you take Synthroid at the same time? So Synthroid, I talked a little bit earlier about taking medication and ketones. So if your doctor has said that it's safe for you, then yes, absolutely, you can take it. Just take it away from Synthroid. Synthroid is something you're supposed to take first thing in the morning, away from all other supplements anyway. So you want to make sure that you maintain that window and don't add anything in until that that complete window has cleared, often 2 to 3 hours. So sodium. Sodium, we get a lot of questions about sodium overall. There's a really great article on the Prove It website called "It's Not Salt's Fault." Salt has been, and sodium has been demonized similarly to the way fats have been demonized. So there is not as much risk with consuming sodium as people have been led to believe. If you're somebody with a sodium sensitivity or something like that, that might be different, or a genetic condition that you aren't able to tolerate high sodium levels, also that's different. But overall, sodium is not as detrimental as we have been led to believe. So I'd encourage going to read that article. I've seen a few questions about medical practitioners and talking to your doctor and trying to introduce them to ketones or talk to them about the sodium content. And it's really hard to change someone's current school of thought if they're not open to another way of thinking. So if your doctor's not open to looking into what you're taking or doing a little bit of extra research on that, then my suggestion would be to find another practitioner who is, somebody who's able to support you while you move into a ketogenic lifestyle and taking exogenous ketones. But again, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do to force your doctor to understand or to look into it. So if that's the case, then you do need to find a provider, an additional provider at least, who can support you through that. So ketones and concussions, that's a great question. So ketones and traumatic brain injury, there's a lot of research going on right now looking at the role of beta hydroxybutyrate and concussions. I do like to talk a lot about TBIs, or traumatic brain injury, as well. What we find with traumatic brain injury and also with Alzheimer's is anytime we have any kind of impairment or injury to the brain, the body can't, or the brain can't use glucose as fuel. So it's not actually able to uptake glucose as its primary fuel source. And this is where we start to see some of those negative effects after a concussion. This is where we see some of the decline with cognition as well. So although our glucose metabolism is impaired, what we have found is that our ketone metabolism is not. So the brain can't use sugar, but it can use ketones. So there's some really interesting research looking at the administration of exogenous ketones extremely, or right after a concussion, and the benefits that people will experience there as well. So often, and yes, talking about kids with concussions, or people who are playing contact sports, hockey, football, it would probably be a great idea to give those individuals ketones while, right after a game or while they're playing, just to support brain health overall. But absolutely, it would be worth it to introduce it if they have suffered a concussion, as long as their healthcare provider has said that it's right for you. So does prednisone keep me from being in ketosis? So that might be tricky, actually. So no, it shouldn't prevent you. It might be a little harder for you to get into nutritional ketosis because there are a lot of other hormones at play now. So it might be a little bit more of a challenge for you to get into nutritional ketosis. But this is where exogenous ketones could play a role as well if you're not able to move in. Again, it depends on your dose, how much you're taking, how often, how long you're on it for. Usually you're not on it for long periods of time, so that will depend on each individual. But you should, if you're not on an extremely high dose, be able to get into nutritional ketosis. It might take you a little bit longer. But if you're not able to, then that's where I would add in the exogenous ketones if your doctor says it's safe given your health condition. So ketones and high blood pressure. So I'm going to take that'll be my last question, I think, for today, but I get tons of questions on blood pressure, and I'm going to add in cholesterol in there as well. And so the concern is often, will ketones lead to elevated blood pressure, high cholesterol? And the answer to that is no, it shouldn't. What we do often see with a ketogenic diet is you will see an initial spike in cholesterol levels, but that will usually level out and go down. So I encourage patients to give themselves a 6-month window to allow for that sort of rebalance of their cholesterol levels. Sometimes I'll check again at the 3-month level just to see if the HDL has gone up, which is a good cholesterol. But if the other cholesterol levels or LDL have gone up, I just wait a little bit. I want that 6-month period of time, and it does usually come back down. And it shouldn't cause an increase in blood pressure either. And there is some interesting research looking at ketogenic diet and a sort of a low fat diet, and they find that the low carb diets are the most beneficial when it comes to decreasing waist circumference, decreasing blood pressure, and cholesterol levels. So I hope that answered all of your questions, you guys. I hope you've had an absolutely wonderful start to your new year. I will try and go back and answer some of your questions if I miss them. If not, we have an amazing epic event coming up soon, so hopefully you'll all be there. Please come and say hello. Ask me your questions, share your stories. You know, that's my favorite part of the Prove It community, so please come by and say hello if I do get a chance to see you at Epic. And I hope you'll be joining all of us in the reboot coming up this week. So enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.